Section 18, and the Governor's February 12, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to MGL 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. So this meeting is being recorded by the town, by the Berkshire Edge, by the Berkshire Eagle, and other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. Listing of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. We have 3 sets of minutes. February 8th, 2022 joint budget meeting, February 9th, 2022 joint budget meeting, February 14th, 2022 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 8th, 2022, February 9th, 2022, and February 14th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Eric?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Select Board's announcements, statements. Eric?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed?
Nothing.
Lee?
Nothing.
And I have nothing. Town Manager's report.
Okay, thanks, Steve. First on my list is Houstonic Waterworks, and I just wanted to mention that the town did finally receive a copy of the notice of noncompliance from DEP late Thursday afternoon, and we went ahead and posted that first thing Friday morning on the Houstonic Waterworks tab on the Select Board page of our website. In summary, DEP notes 4 violations for exceeding the maximum contaminant level of halocidic acids and for failure to notify the public and report exceedances to DEP in the 3rd and 4th quarters of 2021. So they're now required to submit a report to DEP by April 4th, outlining their immediate actions to address these violations. And then by May 20th, they're required to submit an engineer's report to DEP documenting the causes for this exceedance and recommendations for preventing it from happening again. So I just wanted to point everybody to the website if they'd like to see a hard copy of that. And then last on my list for this evening is a list of board and committee vacancies. We currently have 15 different boards looking for members at the moment. So a complete listing was included in the packet for this evening, but I'll just run through them quickly. For anyone out there looking to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, our Agricultural Commission, the Cable Advisory Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Cultural Council, the Design Advisory Committee, the Historic District Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, the Planning Board, the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee, our Strategic Sustainability and Livability Committee, our Tree Committee, the W.E.B. Du Bois Legacy Committee, and finally our Zoning Board of Appeals. And that's all I have. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Excuse me, Steve.
Yes.
Are we recording?
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Ed. Licenses and permits. Vern Kennedy for the number 10 requesting a 1-day liquor license for the Berkshire Opera Festival event to be held at St. James Place, 352 Main Street, Great Barrington on March 27th, 2022 from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Not sure there's anyone here. I'm not sure there has to be, but
Vern is on.
I am here if you can.
Okay, there you are.
Hear me?
Did you want to say anything about this?
Nope. Just if you have any questions, I'm here for you. If you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Steve, I have to recuse myself. I'm a board member of St. James Place.
Thank you. Do I have
Motion to approve.
do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Ed, a second by Eric. Do we have any questions? Not seeing any questions. Roll call vote. Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Yes.
And yes, it's unanimous, 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is Mama Lo's Southern Style Barbecue requesting an annual common victualler license for 284 Main Street. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the common victual license for Mama Lo's Southern Style Barbecue at 284 Main Street.
Second.
Any questions?
No, just a resounding. It's nice to see a black-owned company in Great Barrington, and I hope they have collard greens and make chopped barbecue. And I hope they do well. I wish them well.
Thank you, Garfield. Roll call vote. Garfield.
Yes.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Yes.
Lee.
A resounding yes.
And yes, it's unanimous. Lastly, lastly, Andrew Sagarin for Berkshire South Regional Community Center requesting permission to use town roads for their 8th annual 5K run walk on May 2nd. And it says 2020. I think it's 2022.
That's actually, it's May 14th,
Well, we
22.
got the year and the date wrong, Andrew. Sorry.
That was an error on the first letter I sent that I guess didn't get corrected.
Okay. So it's May, just to be clear, it's May 14th, 2022.
We missed it 2 years ago.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the use of town road for the 8th annual 5K run walk on May 14th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess I should say for the Berkshire South Regional Community Center. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. Can we just make a remark that all department heads who need to know, make sure the date is correct for them, the police and DPW, et cetera. Make sure there's no confusion. So, thank you. Roll call vote. Garfield.
Yes.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Yes.
Lee.
Aye.
And I. It's unanimous. Good luck, Andrew.
Thank you.
Next is a continued discussion on the proposed short-term rental bylaw and to set a date for public input session. So my hope tonight is that we get through the pieces that are still out there. I don't intend to take a vote on the entire bylaw tonight because we want to have a public input session. So if we take a vote on the entire bylaw, why would we have a public input session? It's kind of like, it's not a public hearing, but similar to taking a vote before a public hearing. What sense would that make? So that's number one. And then we'll see if we can set a date. I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we talked about possible dates, and April 4th was a Monday. That was okay to do. It was as late as we could go, though.
Yeah, I think April 4th would be fine. Yes.
Does that work for the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we will do it at 6 o'clock on April 4th. And right now there are 24 attendees and 6 panelists for a total of 30 people. Chris, do you want to try to guide us through the little bit we have left?
Sure, I'll try to do that. Can we go ahead and share the screen, Steve?
Yeah, please.
Okay, hopefully what you're seeing here is the 2-page draft that was in your packet. It had my comments in the margin. My comments in your packet are just these ones that say Rimbold. Can you all see those? On the screen, just in the last few minutes looking at this, I've made a few other comments or changes. You don't see those in your packet. They're under this heading, Chris Rimbold. That's just for my own thinking as we go through this. So what you're seeing is what you have in your packet, just with my own changes to help guide us through. So and we can talk about all this. The first item I think you all wanted to clear up was coming to an understanding of this item 3, of what commercial interest means. And I think with that also comes, I'd suggest defining residence better. Maybe instead of defining resident owner, let's just define resident. And we'll come back to that. But in terms of commercial, just, you know, when we do zoning, our default dictionary, if it's not in zoning, is the Webster's Unabridged. And just looking at the Webster's Unabridged dictionary, commercial is pretty straightforward. There's lots of possible meanings, but the first 4 are of, pertaining to, or characteristic of commerce, engaged in commerce, prepared, done, or acting with sole or chief emphasis on saleability, profit, or success, able to yield or make a profit. So I think it's clear what commercial means in this case, that simply doing short-term rental for profit's sake, simply having a house to offer for short-term rental for profit's sake is something that you would like to deter. That makes sense.
Yeah, and by the word deter, I think what's interesting there doesn't mean we're outlawing it. It means we're just trying to reduce or not encourage. I think that's important to have that word there before commercial.
This bylaw, this bylaw as written does not prohibit.
Right, but I think, so Chris,
May I ask a question?
of course.
If one of the purposes is to deter short-term rentals for the sake of deterring short-term rentals, that's new. Or I guess to me, that's new. That's not what we've been talking about. That's not, the purpose of this was not to have fewer short-term rentals. The purpose was to stop residences from being business zones, to provide safety, the other things. But the goal was not to reduce short-term rentals. That was a means to an end.
No, and I agree. I don't think Chris said that, and I don't think I said it either. If I did, that's
I don't
not.
think I did.
Yeah, I don't.
I
I
still
may have
don't,
misunderstood.
yeah, I still don't understand what we mean by number 3 then.
What do you
What
suggest?
I mean by it, I can tell you what I would mean by that is to not have someone come into town and buy 6 properties, live in none of them, and run them as a short-term rental.
Okay, that's what I thought we meant.
That's my definition of it. That, which is why I stress the word deter.
Right.
That does not stop someone who has a primary residence and buys the house next door and uses that as a short-term rental, because that's 2 places and they do have some interest in Great Barrington.
Now,
Go ahead, Chris.
you might want to look at then,
I
there
got
was
to-
some discussion last time about residents, and I don't know if you want to tweak that definition, and whether 183 days is where you want to go. That maybe the next topic you want to. I think it makes sense to go in that order if you want to talk about how to regulate these.
Yeah, and
Can I say something when you're done, Stephen?
so Lee had her hand up and then you, yes, Garfield. I think a residence, Chris, I like what you wrote there and I had written the same thing. I just think we have to plug in the number of days. I think a full or part-time owner who resides greater than X number of days in the aggregate in the town of Great Barrington. And we just plug in the days. I think that would make sense. Lee and then Garfield.
I just, if I could just,
Yes, of course.
the reason to do that, full or part-time, because there was a lot of discussion about treating people differently. And if you just define resident, full or part-time, and then what you're talking about only is the number of days that they're here. You're not, defining them in a certain way, part-time or short-time or second homeowner or whatever. So,
Lee?
sorry, go ahead.
No, that makes sense. Lee, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to suggest actually a tweak. Rather than say resident owner, what about just saying resident and defining that as a full-time or part-time owner who resides greater than, let's say, 150 days in the aggregate in the town of Great Barrington. So by doing that and getting rid of resident owner, and we include a full-time or a part-time owner, then we don't have that differential between we're not differentiating between the part-time and full-time, which was one of the discussion items last meeting. So what I would like to propose is changing resident owner to resident and tweaking the definition to a full-time or part-time owner who resides greater than 150 days. And what that does is that brings into the fold any part-time owners that are invested in this community and would like to participate in operating a short-term rental.
Did I capture
Thank you,
that?
Lee.
Did I capture that?
Yeah. Do you want me to say it slowly?
No, I think he has it right there.
Oh, sorry.
So I think I got it. So
Yeah.
you can discuss.
Oh yeah, let me just
Okay, Garfield, go ahead. And then Ed.
Okay, I wanted to hear what you interpret as a deter again, Stephen, and what.
I don't think there's a difference between the word deter and prohibit. I think deter is important. We're not prohibiting short-term rentals. We're just we're not prohibiting, we're just trying to make sure that they don't get out of control in Great Barrington.
Okay, because I looked it up in the dictionary. So I thought it should be strong because that's kind of the intent. And it says to turn aside, discourage, or prevent from acting. And that's one. Two is to inhibit. So I think what the intent is to somewhat inhibit commercial, not just deter them. I just want to make sure that it carries the weight that it's supposed to carry.
Understood. Ed, go right ahead.
Yeah, though while 150 days is better than 183 days, it doesn't do what Lee just said it does, which is allows any part-time resident. It only allows part-time residents who are here 5 months. So I still don't think it solves the problem of separating full-time residents from part-time residents. It just slightly broadens who is full-time. To me, that 5 months is much too long. It doesn't help, for example, Michelle Lubert, who, what if she moves away, still has the house here, needs to visits it a month or so, still wants to keep her house, but needs it to be available that month. It doesn't. It still divides us. It lets a few more people in the gate before dividing us, but it's definitely still a division.
I think there's two ways of looking at that, Ed. I think I understand your point, but also what we were talking about last time is a division between primary residents and second homeowners. It does do away with that division. It may cause another one, as you point out.
It could be 90, it could be 120, but this may be the area that you look to come to some agreement.
Yeah, I would like a much lower number. Because it's, if you're not, first of all, it does make you a second homeowner. If you're there for 150 days, you're somewhere else the other days. So it is a second homeowner, presumably, or a camper. So I would like to see a much lower number.
well,
I can live with the lower number. I just don't know how low.
yeah. I mean, I think there's this delicate balance we're trying to create, Ed, and we're trying to allow for people that are invested in this community to operate short-term rental. So although I do understand your concern about being too high, at the same time, we have to realize that people like the person that you mentioned are free to seasonally rent or month-to-month rent. So there are other options. We're just talking about a non-occupied property. So That's really important to realize that people that have properties that they operate as short-term rentals have other options. And if we are trying to deter people coming in solely as a commercial activity, that we need to set some kind of limit that does that. So I would advocate for staying with 150 days and continuing on.
And I really resent saying people who have buy into our community, or whatever the words were, when talking about someone who's here for 4 months, supports the Mahawi, shops in our stores, is possibly a member of a religious organization here. To say that they're not invested in our community is offensive. That's what I'm trying to avoid here. And yes, of course, we all have other options. If I live here year round, I have other options. I could rent it year round. We have other options, but this is still dividing second homeowners. It's just, again, opening the door to people who are here a little bit longer.
So one of the suggestions that was given to me by someone in an email was that we have two types of licenses, and just hear me out. So when someone applies for a permit, they can apply for a residential, or they can apply for, I'm going to use the word commercial. And anyone can get one of each, and all they have to do is sign an affidavit that says that they, at some point during the year, they live in that home. I don't know if that solves it or not, but the most anyone can get is two, and that limits it, obviously. I think I'm okay with that, but I will throw that out there for discussion.
Well, I would like to hear what Ed's number, what is this number that you have in mind, Ed?
I'm much less concerned with this because I don't think this is a problem. I would not let corporations do it. I don't have a problem limiting it like Steve just said. If what we're trying to do is stop people from coming in and buying up lots of homes and turning them to short-term rentals, let's do that. Let's not differentiate between somebody who uses it for a month, uses it for 3 months, but it's part of this community, somebody who has lived here their whole life and then moves to Florida but still wants to keep their house. I just don't see the problem the same way.
Yeah, and so if we limit it to 2 licenses, it's possible that will still serve the same purpose. And preventing commercial is what we want to do. I get that. We definitely want to prevent commercial. It's just, I'm not sure we all agree on the same definition of commercial.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah. So moving on with what the thought and the thread I was going towards was, if we group a resident, including a part-time resident and a full-time resident, right? And we let both residents, whether part-time or full-time, have 2 licenses, providing that one is a property that they use. And so then this evens out the part-time, full-time issue, and it allows everyone to participate. So I think what we're talking about right now is what defines a part-time resident, from what I can understand what the discussion is. So with 150 days, I can see that Ed is just not interested in having any kind of regulation in terms of splitting, adding like a number of days for unoccupied rentals. But if we go down this road and equalize the part-time and the full-time residents, what I'm trying to find is what limit of days are we comfortable with the unoccupied property, because what we're really trying to do is make sure that there's enough housing options available for people that live and work in this community. So there's this delicate balance we're trying to achieve, and so that's where the part-time, full-time issue, I think, is coming into focus. But my curiosity and my question is, what defines a part-time resident, whether it's 180 days or 150 days. So we do need to bring that into the fold. And, we also need to think that there are people that are here full time that can't find housing. And so I think that we need to remember that. So
I would go with what Steve suggested. Someone who uses the house as a part-time resident.
What is the part-time? What's the number though?
I don't think
That's what we're
I don't
talking.
think that's for us to say. I don't think it's for us to tell someone like Michelle Lubert, who has lived here her whole life, how many days she has to be here to still be considered part of the community. I don't think that's our. I just think he says.
How does that differentiate between an investor?
If she says this is still my home and I use it some of the year, I'm not yet. And we're all investors, right? I bought my house. It's worth a lot more than I paid for it. So far, a good investment. We're all invested, so that I don't think that's useful. It's her home. This is the home she grew up in. It's the home her father owned, right? I think, again, I like Steve's suggestion.
So we do need to have a definition of a part-time resident.
Yes.
So be.
You want to repeat it, Steve?
The only thing that was suggested was that someone who will sign an affidavit that says they use a home for residence during the year.
Well, I think that opens up a huge loophole. I think we're going backwards, and we're opening ourselves up to people that say, "Hey, I use the residence. I use it for 2 days, and therefore I should be able to purchase properties at will." So I think that we need to be careful that we don't go down that road. And we do need some kind of sense of limitation. This is not something that is new. Many communities have done limitations. Lennox has set 75 days. So this is not something that we're inventing. And it is very, very important that we have a limitations, because when people are looking to buy properties solely as a commercial investment, they're going to look for these loopholes. So I think we need to be strong in limiting the days. So I disagree with Ed's suggestion, although I respect his
Steve's suggestion.
Well, no, but you're saying that don't have an affidavit, and I'm saying that makes it too easy.
I said that because it was suggested to me.
Yeah, I'm just saying that has a loophole that when people are coming in to profit over properties that residents and essential workers actually need to live here, that's taking away housing stock. So I do feel that we need to set a limit. We can't just have an affidavit. I think that opens up a loophole, and we need to be more strict.
Chris, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think, and I'll share my screen again in a second. I think the only place this becomes important is on page 2, where you're talking about, I'll share the screen again. Where you're right now it's under registration, but really this is a regulation that we should move up.
Right.
Onto page 1. So this is the only place it matters how you're defining this, is because a resident owner can offer 2 dwelling units, but a non-resident owner can only offer 1. So is that something you all agree on? I mean, if you want to allow that possibility for somebody who resides here for X amount of days, then you have to set the number of days to be able to do 2 properties, then you need to decide how to define it. If you want everybody just to have 1, whether they live here or, all the time or none of the time, then you don't really have to define it. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I think you are. Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, so to clarification, so if we do in fact change that definition up top from resident owner to owner, then down here under registration, this would also say, by obtaining a short-term rental license, a owner can offer 2 separate dwelling units. So owner now would include a part-time and a full-time. So I think what the sticking point right now is what is a part-time resident? And what we have is 150 days up there. So I think that's the issue that we're discussing right now, as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
one of the things. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I see that, Lee. That here you would have to change this to owner, but
we can.
This is kind of a principal point. Do you agree that there should be some people who can have 2 dwelling units and some people who can only have 1?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, part of the suggestion, which I'm probably not doing this justice, is that we have 2 types of licenses. One is a commercial license. Accept the fact that they're going to be commercial. And you can apply for a commercial license and you can have one. And then you can have a resident license or an owner license, and you can have one of those. So you could have up to two, and one being commercial. So if you live in Sheffield, you find a good buy, you want to buy a house here, and you want to use that, that's fine. The other being your resident, and in that case, we either go with the affidavit or we all agree, or a majority of us agree on the number of days.
Exactly. So I think that's what we're back to, the number of days.
Okay.
Well, there's two questions. Is the number of days becomes less important if you agree there should be two types of licenses. Because if you only live here 20 days and it says 110, just making up a number, so you just buy a commercial license and you can still use your house. But you can only use one.
Yeah.
You may not like that. I'm just throwing that out there as a compromise.
Yeah. No, so I'm just wondering what's to stop someone from saying that they reside in it and they apply for a resident license when they're only here for 10 days. I mean, again, I'm trying to ensure that there's not loopholes for this. So, I mean, we could, so that's the question. I mean, are we happy with two? Should we, have residents full-time and part-time just have one, as long as they can claim that they have some kind of investment in the community, and then there's a commercial license, so everyone gets one. We could do that. And I mean, really the two came in before as a suggestion when we were differentiating between full and part-time. So another question is, do we just allow everyone to have one? They're invested in some fashion, whether it's a certain number of days or affidavit. And so I asked the board if they would want to limit it to one, and have the 90-day limit in terms of unoccupied residence. You have the rest as it is, but in terms of having a license to operate it, then at least we would have that as a record that they've signed this affidavit. But I would ask that if we're going to open up that, we would limit it to one for across the board.
Yes, go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I would go back to, I support what Steve suggested, which is two. One is a residence, which is defined as you swear it's your resident, that you live there part of the year. And the other could be commercial. I think that solves our problem that meets the definition we came up with deterring commercial interests, stops people from coming in and buying 5 or 6 or 4 or even 3. To me, that does it, and it sounds like a good compromise. I do want to say, having just heard this tonight, reserve the right, which I guess we do with all of this, to wait till we hear from people.
Yeah, no, that's Lee. What if? And I'm just trying to come up with a compromise. What if we leave it up to Chris and David to come up with some sort of see if there's a way to close the loophole?
Mm-hmm.
And Ed's right. We're not voting on this tonight anyways. So if there's a way to close the loophole that someone has to prove that they're here so many days, that, there may be some legal way to do that, that they actually use the house as a residence.
With respect, I think that is going to be awfully tough to prove. You can prove through various other documents whether or not you have a primary versus a secondary home.
Mm-hmm.
Registration, car registration, where you vote. That is more or less straightforward, and it's documentation that the assessor relies on to bill property tax and non-domiciled personal property tax. So that's a set system. But
so let me ask this question.
Some other, verifying some other number of days, I think is a really really tough thing to define. I don't think there's a way to close that loophole.
So let me ask this question, Chris. So that's a really good point. How do we prove 150 days? How do we prove 60 days? How do we prove any of that?
Yeah. As I think about that, it might be difficult to do.
So we might just be back to signing a legal document that says you live here 90 days, 60 days, you live here, period. And that's a loophole in itself.
Yeah.
Why would that be a loophole? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, how do we prove, if someone says, if we have let's use 150 days, which, and we say you have to live there 150 days in order for you to do what you have to do. How do we prove they're there 150 days, not 149, not 130, not 120?
Now I'm just throwing this out. I don't even know if this is the right idea, but could it be something stickered like you do with your automobile? You have a sticker on there that says, you're good for a year, if you will. That tells you everyone that they're good for a year. Can you have a sticker or something like that posts that will let you know the time frame?
No, I think what the problem is, Garfield, is proving someone is actually there 150 days. Say, if we say you have to be there 150 days in order to use your residence as a short-term rental, there's no way to prove that. Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, so in the research that I've done, I know that in places that do have licenses and that do have limitations for the numbers of properties that can be operated as a short-term rental, for example, Seattle has this split, but they don't have a difference between part-time and full-time. So they either have a primary resident is allowed to is allowed and licensed to operate 2 short-term rentals. And if you're not a primary residence, then you have a commercial license that has 1. So it's clear, and it answers kind of Chris's point that you can verify if someone's a primary resident, and you can also verify if they're not. But when you have this kind of gray area of part-time, full-time, or then that's what we're wrestling about. So we're wrestling with, and I do respect that we have a lot of part-time owners or part-time residents that are invested in this community, and we're trying to find that ability for them to be to fold into this bylaw. But it's a difficult task without being able to fall back onto this primary residency documentation that is easier to prove. So.
That's why I suggest we don't differentiate, because it is hard to prove.
But yeah.
Chris?
Well, and the 90 days, does that, I'm unclear. Sorry to be jumping around.
No, that's okay.
Does the 90 days, would that apply to everybody? Would that apply just to commercial licenses? Would that apply to somebody who rents there while they live there?
Yeah, that would be across the board for unoccupied properties. So if you own something and you're not there and it's unoccupied, it's across the board 90 days, whether you're have a commercial license or residential license. So that's fine. I think what we're talking about is for people that with regards to ADUs and rooms, by right we have. If you look at under rentals of rooms, someone can, when they're in the property, they can by right rent rooms, two rooms or an ADU out. So that's the difference between that is that's an occupied short-term rental. And so that's important to verify or distinguish. So really, when we talk about short-term rental of rooms and secondary units, that's an occupied short-term rental, which we're fine with. That is serving a purpose. That's an existing residential unit that is being repurposed and folded into helping someone looking for short-term rental. I think what the sticking point is really is, trying to allow for part-time residents to be in the fold, and that's proving more difficult. So again, with the research I've done and places that have these licenses, they just distinguish between a primary residence, or resident that you can easily document, and someone that isn't. So I don't know if we're making it harder for ourselves to allow the part-time residents.
Are you abandoning your 150-day suggestion and going back to 183?
No. I'm just saying. I'm backing up what Chris said, saying it's hard.
No, I get that. So, given that, are you?
No. This is just a discussion. Ed.
I guess I'm wondering what we're discussing.
We're discussing how we.
Right. No, we've determined the fact that you can't prove under 183 days how long somebody's in the home.
Right.
We all know that. So then we're back to Steve's proposal, or I'm not sure what Lee's proposal is. It still 150, or is it back to 183?
Well, I'm not sure that we're proposing.
Yeah, we're in the middle of discussing it.
I will wait till there is one.
I think it's been established that easier is primary residence, but some of us don't like that, and I'm one of them. So we've kind of backed ourselves in a little bit of a corner. We're not going to do what's easier, but we have to figure out how to do what we think is the right way of doing it. I think it's much easier to do primary, and I understand why they do that. It's simple.
Yeah. So what if you had a primary license and then you had a commercial license? So I
don't want to discriminate between primary and secondary homeowners.
Well, in order to do to fulfill the purpose and intent, we're going to need to do something. So we again, looking at places that have wrestled with this issue, a primary resident would be, let's say, this is just hypothetically, a primary resident would be allowed to operate two, providing that one is their primary residence, and anyone else would be able to operate one. I mean, that was the original, or we can just say two and two. So you're either have a resident license, or you have a commercial license. So that just means that anyone that's not here for more than 183 days gets a commercial license. So, I mean, it's just real semantics. It's basically saying you're either can prove that you're here as a primary resident or you're not. So,
but are you going back to, if you're a primary resident, you get two, and if you're not, you get one?
Let's just say two and two. Let's not split hairs here. Let's just say two and two.
Okay.
Everyone,
that's what Steve said. Right.
We said 2 and 2.
Well, that was
Steve's proposal, wasn't it?
He was saying an affidavit. So I'm just saying that you either can show that you're a primary resident or you're not. So
it doesn't matter if you get two either way. It doesn't matter if you show it, right? That's why I'm not sure.
I'm just saying that a part-time resident would get a commercial license. That's what I'm saying.
But they wouldn't be, are you saying, just so I can understand it, are you saying that a primary resident could have up to two, a part-time resident could only have one?
No, just say two. Say two and two. So a part-time resident will follow under a commercial license. They get two. An investor gets two. If you're a primary resident, you get two. So it's two and.
So we don't discriminate. Everyone.
Yes.
We limit it to two.
Yes. So that way it's easy to prove. If they're a primary resident, they get two, and we limit.
Let me ask this, and maybe I'm being thick. Do we even care if they're a resident now? You just get two.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that for the by right, when we're still looking for the difference between the occupied residence and the unoccupied, I think that still falls into play. So if you have a commercial license, you still need to be on the property in order to be able to by right.
Okay, so I see your point. So what you're saying is that you can have a total of two licenses.
Yes.
One being a primary and a commercial, or two commercial?
Yes, so basically, primary residences would apply for the residential license, and they would be allowed to. And if you're a part-time resident or investor, you apply for the commercial license and you get two. So that way we can see, we can just keep an eye on it. And
Is there a difference in the regulations for the two?
no, but
I mean, if you're, in other words, if the primary resident is not in their home, that's the same as a commercial. All the regulations are the same, except what we're calling it. Right? If this is my primary residence, I go away the month of July, I can rent it every night of the month of July, same as a second homeowner could. Right? There's no difference in the regulations in the two. Unless I'm present, then there's a difference if I'm actually in the home.
correct.
Okay.
That seems like a decent compromise, actually.
I'm having some difficulty following it. Sorry if I'm being dense, but
No, you're not.
I don't know why you would have two different types if it's all basically the same. I could see having two different types if one of them was limited. If you limited the number of commercial licenses available.
That's why I asked that. It sounds like what we're saying is anybody can own two, can do short-term rentals in two residences, up to two residences.
Well, before there wasn't a limit, so I think that this is key in general. So I think the question is, how much we limit licenses.
Put a cap on the number of commercial licenses.
Well,
I mean, that is something that other communities have done, is that they limit the number of commercial licenses.
Otherwise, there's no difference, and you're not deterring commercial interests at all.
Right.
Everybody can get two. My wife can have two. I can have two.
Right.
My daughter can have two. Whatever.
Right.
And none of us live here. Let's say, just for sake of argument, then you're not. Got to limit something. Otherwise, you're not meeting item number 3.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I agree.
This is all trying to figure out the definition of resident.
Yes, it is.
Which I'm not laughing. I think it was important, and it was a very good discussion.
It's been a fine discussion. I think we have not. I think we've all compromised to the point that we're maybe don't have a bylaw. We need to figure out. I mean, there is the 90-day part, and if I understand that correctly, that if it's your residence and you're there, you can rent it out for more than 90 days, and if you're not there, you can only use it for 90 days.
Correct. Yeah. So that speaks to the unoccupied short-term rental, which is really what we're mostly deterring. We're trying to deter people from coming in and solely buying properties to make a profit. So that 90 days across the board deals with whether it's an unoccupied residence. So, but I guess where we are is the license. So what, in addition, we want to do is make sure that people don't come and buy multiple properties. So we're trying to give residents enough freedom that they can have more than one license possibly, but deter anyone that's solely coming in to make profit, not to do that. So, throwing the question out, I mean, in terms of commercial licenses, do we want to even open the door? Do we just want to, go back to limiting either by number for the entire town? So if we have a cap of, 20 commercial licenses, or do we just limit it to one? If you don't have any investment in this community, you can only have one. So,
I don't know if even the 90 days deters commercial interests. I mean, you could buy a house, not live there at all, simply buy it as an investment property. You're capped at 90 days. If you're renting it at $250, $300 a night, you could possibly still pay the mortgage on that investment property.
Yeah.
And let it sit empty the rest of the year, and it's not doing any good. So
Well, I mean,
that structure the rest of the year when somebody who can afford it is just letting it sit vacant because they're capped at 90 days.
well, I mean, okay, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Lee. That's fine.
So, I mean, in the conversations I've had with realtors is that what I've been told is that when investors are coming in to look at a community, whether to purchase property solely as an investment, the first thing they'll ask is what's the bylaws on short-term rentals, and what they're looking for is the cap, and they're looking to see the number of days, and from that they look at how much profit can they make in those number of days. So it's very, very important, I believe, and what I've been told is to have a lower limit to deter people, because what they're going to do is they're going to do the math and they're going to figure out, okay, well, it's not worth it if because it's going to be unoccupied as a property owner, it's not worth it for me. So that is actually a very, very important deterrent, Chris.
Okay.
And that is why, most places do stick with not 90 days, or in Lennox's case, it was 75 days. So that actually.
Let me ask you a question, and it is not a proposal. This is like bargaining. This is not my last best offer. Just thinking out loud, which is really dangerous at this time of night after I've worked a full day. So if we limit everyone just to one, but we make it 180 days instead of 90, kind of serves the same purpose, because if you have two, you can have each 90, 180 days, and you're using up two houses instead of one. And I'm just throwing that out there. Tell me why that's a bad thought.
If we're opening up the day limit again, possibly a limit will stop somebody from buying it, but also a limit will stop somebody from renting it, bringing in taxes, bringing in tourists who spend money. There's a cost to limiting it to 90 days. I get what you're saying. If we're going to have a limit, 180 equals 2 90s.
Yes.
So yeah, I hesitate to say that's a good idea because I think the limit's a bad idea. However, within that would, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just trying to hear why it's a dumb idea, is that instead of saying to someone you can have two houses using up more housing stock at 90 days each, why wrestle with that? Why not just say one house at 180 and you've theoretically opened up more housing stock? There's probably something wrong with that, but it's this time of night, just tell me what's wrong with it.
So across the board, just to clarify what you're possibly proposing, Steve. So everyone would apply for a license.
You get one license, doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, so it depends. So everyone gets one license. It's capped at 180 days if it's unoccupied.
Correct.
If it's occupied, then that's when they can, by right, rent it all year round or an ADU. So, but in order to operate a short-term rental, they have to get a license.
Yeah, they still have to get a license because you want to have a license for the purpose of inspection, et cetera. We want to know who's operating commercially in town, just like we would a restaurant or a clothing store or anything else. It's a commercial venture, whether you live there or not. I'm not throwing out the licensing and registration, but I'm just saying someone, instead of having two houses at 90 days and sitting empty for 3/4 of the year, it's, if you're using it solely as commercial, it's sitting empty for half the year. If you're not using it as commercial, it's your primary residence or your secondary residence, whatever it may be, then it's hardly empty at all.
Well, I have to, a lot of people are saying it's going to sit empty, but I do need to stress that we have a lot of people looking for seasonal rentals. We have, many travel nurses, we have students. So I really disagree with people that saying that, if I'm forced to limit the number of days I can short-term rental, it's going to sit empty. So I think people need to get that out of their heads.
No, I don't disagree. I think you could probably make more money with a short-term rental because you get a higher amount per day. But yeah, I understand your point. It only sits empty if you want it to sit empty. if you don't try to rent it out for seasonal. I understand that.
Well, so that's 6 months, is it? I'm trying to do math real quick.
It is.
So then, Steve, if I live in my home.
Don't ask any hard questions, Ed, please.
Okay. I own another home. I rent another home in town that I do 180 days. I go to visit my mother for a month. I can't rent out the home that I live in for that month because I've already got another home that I do 180 days in.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
the town
just one.
Yes.
the town
that's
doesn't
correct.
get that. So the town doesn't get that 30 days of room tax.
That's true.
Okay.
Yep. I didn't say I thought this thoroughly through.
No, I'm just right.
Yeah, but
That's
but-
what
I think
bothers-
there's
sorry.
advantages and disadvantages to it.
Right. What bothers me with all of this is we're telling the story of investors coming in, buying up houses, kicking out year-round rentals, and running a short-term rental. We're not telling the story of people who live here who are making money. We're telling them we're limiting the value of their house. We're trying to keep property values down. Otherwise, this doesn't work.
And I'm not defending this because it's really not a proposal. But
No.
if you
It's an interesting idea. Again, within this thing that we're doing, which I don't think is good, that's better. How's that?
yeah, that's all I'm saying is that
Right.
if you go to Arizona for 4 months, you're here for 2, so you can make it because you can do it for 6 months. Garfield, go ahead.
A couple of things. One is just on a 90-day note, if you're doing 90 days, you're doing this for $300 a night. Didn't we figure out that's $31,000? If you can't make it work with another $31,000 extra, you need a new account or you're way in over your head, because I think $31,000 is going to supplement anyone just fine. I do have a concern. Excuse me. I do have a concern. Yeah, I didn't speak when you were speaking, Ed.
Go ahead, Garfield.
Thank you. I do have concern about worrying about tourists and the profit. I don't think this town is going to lose any money if we don't have a 30, because we don't know that. That's conjecture. But I'm conjecturing because I think this town will not lose any money because we're a 4-season town and there's people here bumping into each other all the time. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that.
Man?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I don't want to be in the position where this board tells somebody how much money is enough money. $31,000 if they have a special needs child or an elderly parent they're trying to take care of in short-term in assisted living. I just don't think that's our point to say how much money is enough. And second, every day of room tax we don't have, it's not conjecture. That's money we're not getting. So we cut the number of days that people are renting short-term rental. That is less money. I'm not saying it isn't worth it to give up the money. I do think it isn't worth it. You can argue it's worth it, but you can't argue this will not cost the town money. This will cost the town money.
Yeah, and I will agree with you, Ed. I'm not here to tell someone that they can only charge X amount of dollars and they can charge whatever the market will bear. And if they make $70,000, well, bless them, that they're entrepreneurs and they're using that. Hopefully they're spending that money mostly in Great Barrington. And we know that people who have short-term rentals have people who clean the house. They have handy people, hopefully who spend their money in Great Barrington. So I think all of it can be good. Lee, go ahead.
A couple things. First of all, there is a housing crisis, and we have people looking for housing. We have a workforce that is struggling. We have local businesses that need people to work in their establishments, and we have people that have been evicted because of investors coming in and turning what was a residential property into an investment. So I think that can't be discounted. And when there is a crisis, that is a time that the town needs to look at regulations and see how to address this. So with people saying that we're going to be losing money, a lot of those people will end up coming to Great Barrington anyways, or if they don't stay in a short-term rental, they might go to established other lodging establishments such as hotel, bed and breakfasts. So I fail to see that is a direct correlation between someone not being able to stay in town and not spending money in town. So whether they stay in Monterey or not, they're still going to come to Great Barrington. And if they can't stay in Great Barrington, they could probably look at a hotel or an inn. So I think we can't draw a line to that. But my bigger point is that what we're trying to do is create more housing options. And because there is a lack of housing, and that with the proliferation of short-term rentals in our town, that is driving up housing prices. And that is pricing out a lot of locals. So I think that this is a worthwhile conversation in terms of how do we deter investors and limit the amount of short-term rentals, because that does have an adverse effect on neighborhood character, neighborhood cohesion. I know that is something that wasn't permitted into the purpose and intent, but the fact is that proliferation of short-term rentals does have a negative effect on neighborhoods, and most people don't want to see their next door neighbor turn that property into a hotel. So I think that this is a worthwhile conversation to say how we're going to limit this. So I actually dispute the fact that we need to be looking at the money, following the money. I think that residents are important here, and the fact that we have a workforce that is in need of housing, that's something to keep in mind.
So a couple things, and then Garfield, then Ed. I'm not convinced that this is going to do anything for housing stock, at least in the short term. So I do agree with the neighborhood character, and the commercialization of neighborhoods is a problem. But I've yet to be convinced this is going to do anything for housing stock, especially either workforce or affordable, but that may just be me. So Garfield and Ed.
Well, a couple of things. One, the first thing is, and I don't know if this is going to be anything other than my moral issue and me speaking of what I think and what I like and what I think should be, really, really troubled by all the talk of the dollar bill. If this was talking about maybe some race issues or something, I don't think this would be like this. Or we're talking about handing out chocolates. It wouldn't be, but it's a dollar bill, man. And I don't hear anybody but Lee and myself on occasion speaking for anybody in Great Barrington. Everybody's worrying about how much money other people are going to make. How much money are you going to make? How much money are you going to make? You got people coming here who live here part-time. Oh, we don't want to discriminate. No, we don't. But they don't live here. They have not been here all their lives. They are somewhat invested, but they're not invested as much as people who've been here all their life. And there's no one speaking for them other than Lee. Everyone else is worrying about someone making some money. Oh, they're going to be upset if they can't make the money. Oh, they're not going to come to Great Barrington if they can't make this money. Come on, man. It's not all about the dollar bill. It's about people who can live here and want to be here and need some help in leveling out the playing field.
Garfield, first,
I'm not going to tell you how much money you can make, but I think everyone knows that said dollar is plenty.
Garfield, I take exception to the fact that Lee's the only one standing up for people in town.
Okay.
I think the fact is that you're the one who brought up making too much money, and all I'm saying is that none of our business how much money they make. They're private enterprises, and I'm not here to limit how much money they can make or can't make. That's all I'm saying. I'm not in this bylaw going to put in that there's a limit to how much they can make, and that's not why we're necessarily.
Well, I didn't say that either. I said in some degree, but you can charge whatever you want, like you said, Stephen.
Yeah, I agree. I respect what you're saying. I just don't agree.
Right.
Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to address that. I'll let the people who are going to speak and citizens speak address that. I do want to say that this confusing the short-term rental with creating housing is real. I brought it up at the end of last meeting, and I was, despite the fact that the last meeting began with a statement, and I'll quote, "The intention of this bylaw was never to create affordable housing." It ended with, and again I'm quoting the same person, "Any property that is being used as a short-term rental is not workforce housing." So it does have an impact on housing. So I disagree with that, Ed. So obviously anything that's short-term rental is not workforce housing. It's also not a bowling alley or a hotel. It's the people who will be working in the stores downtown that are having trouble finding help will be making between $13.75 and $20 an hour. That's not going to rent these. The planning board has decided that, the subcommittee decided that, and this committee decided that. I think everyone who speaks in favor of this at Citizen Speak talks about the need for housing. This will not create housing. It's confusing it. So I really wish we would stop making that confusing people that way.
Yeah, I think it is a little confusing. I'm not going to go as far as say it won't create housing. Someone may want to sell their house because of our regulation, but the ones that many of them are 500,000 and up, so it's not going to be workforce or affordable housing. That's just my opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right. So where are we going here with this? Because it's 7:10. We know there's going to be a lot of people who want to speak, and then we're going to move on. So where do we want to go with this? Lee?
I'll leave that. I want to answer Ed, but I want to see what people want to do with going from this point.
Well, you've had, we've had good discussion tonight. You haven't really made any changes to what's in front of you. So, if we were just to meet again, I think the draft you would see again is essentially what you saw for tonight's packet. Unless you want me to work directly with two of you and hash something out and bring it back to the board.
I'm up for that.
Yeah,
Well,
I think go ahead.
On it. Be happy to work with Chris and someone else.
Do that.
I would recommend Steve if you got the time.
But
I'll always make the time.
I mean, what I would like to say is that Ed quoted me, although he didn't name me. And, some of the misinformation that's been out there has been spread saying that this was to create affordable housing, and this won't create affordable housing, but this will create more housing options. And to say that locals can't afford these expensive properties that are currently being operated as short-term rental is just disingenuous to what we're trying to do. And there are a lot of residents that would like to live here and continue to work here. So I do think that to say that locals would not benefit from us limiting short-term rentals is unfair. And there are many people that would be willing to purchase properties if there were any. And so I just want to make sure that that's out there.
So Garfield, I'll give you the last word. Your hands up.
You have stopped my audio. I can't go back to audio. Excuse me, the visual. It says you stopped me.
I didn't stop you, that's for sure.
Well,
I'm having no trouble talking.
I went to start video and it says the co-host
There you are.
asked you to start.
There you are. It's okay. I see the top of your head.
I didn't say that before. It said
My
that
hands never left the table, so I didn't do it.
Well, it had stopped. I'm not making it up or not arguing. I'm just.
I know. I'm kidding you, Garfield. Did you have something you wanted to say, Garfield?
No. I just wanted to see why that had happened.
Oh, I have no idea. And well, it's solved. I can see your very handsome face, so I'm happy. Okay, citizen speak time.
Wait. So what did we decide?
I think Ed nominated me. You volunteered, and we would work with Chris to try to bring something back.
I wouldn't mind being in on that, truthfully.
Okay, well, that's three people.
You can't have three.
Right.
I mean,
So
in an ideal world, I'd work with Lee and Ed on this because I think that's where the 2 points of view are.
I'm happy with that.
Do it. I'm just, I can't.
He's honestly against this.
I'm not saying I would come out with something that either of you agree with.
My concern is
come back with something that is that you that you can discuss again.
Well, it's just apparent that Ed is not in favor of any kind of limitations other than banning corporations. So I don't know where that's going to head.
Right.
I'm happy to do that. If
It's perfectly clear. So I don't see what that's
you
going to.
both think it's a good idea, I'm happy to do it. I'll leave that up to Steve.
I mean, if Chris is willing to listen to the two of you, come up with a bylaw that either one of you or both of you don't agree on. If the anticipation is that you're going to come up with something that you both agree on, then Chris is banging his head against the wall.
I suppose that was kind of stupid, wasn't it?
Yes.
My concern is we're going to have to come up with something that gets 3 votes.
Yeah, I mean,
More likely.
close to what we're trying to do, the intention. So I don't know why this is being unraveled at the last minute. And I feel that constantly we are coming up with these roadblocks offered by a particular member of this board. And
No, I don't think it's offered by one member. I think I've had some questions, Lee. I think respectfully.
I mean, the fact that we don't agree with you doesn't mean a roadblock. The roadblock is the 90 days. I didn't put the 90-day limit on. That's not a roadblock.
I'm saying that we keep coming back to certain things, coming back to the very beginning, and you bringing up the fact that it's not going to create affordable housing when I've actually never said it was going to create affordable
I didn't
housing.
say that. I said workforce. You said
Okay,
it would
so
create
let's
workforce.
move ahead. Lee and I will work with Chris on this, and let's move ahead on this. I think our nerves get frayed after about 45 minutes, and it has been a good discussion.
Well, I would want to make sure that we will have time to come to some.
We have time, and we know that we have to have it done by April 4th.
Okay.
We know that. So we've created the deadline, and if that means extra meetings or if that means longer meetings, that's what it means. But we have to have it done, and we will have it done.
Could I also ask that we have a presentation by Granicus before we vote? Some of us haven't seen their presentation. I'm concerned about how they gather the information and what information they gather. I think we're entitled to see that before we vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, can Ed just be signed up? I mean, how will this presentation take place?
I don't know. That's all I said to Ed is we'll look at it. I will talk to Granicus, but I do think the voters are going to want to know that too. I think that's. I don't think they'll be against it, but I think they just are curious. I think everyone has a right to transparency.
Oh no, I'm not.
And I know you agree.
I'm just trying to figure out how this is going to work.
I don't know. I'll figure that out afterwards. Okay. Citizen speak time for residents of Great Barrington or homeowners or property owners. Everyone has 3 minutes. I ask you to let's try this a little differently, address the chair and not mention select board members by name. And let's talk about the article and not recap what we talked about for the last 45 minutes and who said what. Just to make it a little easier. Frederica Siegel, please.
Yes, thank you so much. These meetings are getting increasingly torturous.
I need your name and address. I'm sorry.
Yes, Frederica Siegel, 27 Round Hill Road.
Thank you.
These meetings are getting increasingly torturous and unproductive. The idea of 150 days means nothing to nobody. It's not a legal definition of a resident. And it really speaks to your inability, the board's inability to decide whether they want to create 2 classes of ownership or not. And I think that is really fundamental to everything that you want to accomplish. Do you want to distinguish between people who live here more than half the year and vote, or are you willing to just eliminate that and go with anybody who owns property? And the idea of 150 days, 183 days, it's not serving you well. I heard that you want to have the number 3 is to deter commercial interests. And at the same time that you're talking about deterring commercial interests, you're talking about having part-time residents get a commercial license. That is about as unproductive a solution as you can get. So I feel you have to start over from the beginning and figure out what are your operating principles and what are you really trying to accomplish.
Thank you very much. James.
Good evening, Board. My name is James Garzone at 84 North Plain Road. I want to thank the chairman for trying to broker a solution between the contentious disagreements on the board. I also want to thank Mr. Rembold for trying to broker an agreement between the two different parties who have difference of opinions. If you want to talk about the housing stock, I can give a specific example where I know 3 families that are being evicted from their homes because they're being converted to condos. That's a problem. We can talk about the commercial interests doing short-term rentals, which can be a problem, and the solution of maybe limiting it to 2 is a great compromise. I just would like for the board to be more amenable to a compromise. I feel that it's become too acrimonious. I feel that, thank you to the chairperson for trying to stop some talk of some socialism that was brought up in the last meeting. I feel that trying to restrict any profits is un-American and unconstitutional. We should all come to an agreement and a compromise. I mean, that's what makes this country great. That's what makes Great Barrington great. We want to have a community for all. I just want to say this doesn't impact me personally, so I have no stake in this. The only thing I want is for the community to come together and to come to a compromise that helps all. This is not a solution for affordable housing. This is not for workforce. This is not even to increase the housing stock, because when the commercial interests leave, those very expensive homes won't be for affordable housing or for workforce. I can tell you personally, I was looking into a 3-family house this weekend that I got outbid, that I wasn't going to transfer into short-term rentals. I was going to provide more housing for the community, upgrade the home. It was a 3-family. It was going to make long-term. I got outbid, which is the American way. Someone offered more than I did. So I just go back and please, let's have a substantial compromise, and let's stop being acrimonious, and let's stop saying that let's limit profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Robert. You're unmuted. Just give your name and address, please. You are unmuted.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Now we can't.
All right. Robert Sonecker, 12 Gilmore Avenue.
Thank you.
Thanks for creating better ground rules this evening, Steve. Appreciate that. There's one comment that keeps recurring, talking about the neighborhoods turning into hotels. I think one person mentioned it last week, where it's, you know, a horizontal hotel. How would you know the difference between an Airbnb home in a neighborhood and a home that is a weekend home in a neighborhood? We own one of these homes next door to us, and in fact, our neighbors and ourselves have enjoyed the company of some of our guests. We've had them over for, you know, social events and things like that. So we've gotten to meet some pretty interesting people. Based on the fact that it's just a small 3-bedroom house, families usually come to do it and stay there. So the only indication anyone's actually in the house are a couple of cars in the driveway. Same as would be if it were a resident in that house. So I would like a little distinction, or at least a little proof that the neighborhood character is changing because of the Airbnb status. Because from our perspective in our neighborhood, and you can ask my neighbors, that isn't the case here. I also would be interesting to find more comparative communities that are going through similar situations. I don't think it's fair to look at Seattle, New York, or San Francisco, or some of these bigger communities as to what they've done and how they've addressed the issue. I think Lenox, Stockbridge, some of the other locations in the Berkshires are more in line. Other small resort towns or vacation towns might be in line. I think of the Outer Banks in North Carolina and how they handle most of the housing stock there is owned by out-of-towners. And the other fact of the confusion over what this issue is all about. And I appreciate both sides trying to really define what we're trying to accomplish here. And I tend to agree that, is this about short-term rentals, or is this about creating housing stock? Because I find myself confused when both terms are used during the course of many discussions. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Michelle Lubera, your hand went down, but I know you had your hand up for a while. So I'm going to recognize you, assuming your hand went down by mistake.
Michelle LeBear, 70 Division Street. It didn't go down by mistake. I just got tired of holding it up electronically.
Okay, no problem.
It's okay. Just a couple of things. Not referring to anybody on the board in particular, but a couple comments were made. I was offended several times during the course of the discussion. I'm turning 64 this month. I was born 3 days after my mom and dad moved into the family homestead at 70 Division Street, a house my dad built. And to hear someone say, you know, we want to encourage people to invest in the community. That really hurts. I've been here 64 years. I invested in this community long before a lot of members on the board did. So I would suggest, if you want to sell this, you don't say something like that. Also, the assumption being made that you know the financial circumstances of people doing this. You don't have any idea what money my husband and I need to have a comfortable retirement. So please don't make those assumptions. It was also said that it was to deter commercial businesses from buying up houses. However, a few times during the conversation, the word prevent commercial businesses. So is it prevent or to deter? And then another comment was made, in the end, someone could sell their home. Well, you're listening to somebody who does not want to sell their home. I want to hold on to it. I've invested in this community, and I want to have a comfortable retirement. I think for some reason, I'm being backed into the corner and forced to solve, in some small way, solve the housing crisis in Great Barrington. And by the way, there's a housing crisis across the United States. It's not just Great Barrington. So it's going to be an interesting annual town meeting. For once, the discussion's not about the marijuana. It's going to be about this, because I'm pretty angry over this and the discussion that went on tonight. First off, I just want to thank Steve for you to, as other people have said, trying to broker this during the evening. And Chris, I think you've done a great job tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Dale Abrams.
Hello, thank you for recognizing me. Dale Abrams, 6 Lake Mansfield Road. I worked in the real estate field for about 14 years. So in some ways, these are not new issues of the difficulty of housing stock being pulled into short-term rental. It just used to be a longer version of the short-term rental market. The increase in the online version of short-term rentals has dramatically changed that problem. And I've lived in other communities that are primarily tourist destination communities, and these are issues that a community really has to grapple with. If we don't, it's a serious problem for our community. I hear from my friends who live in the same neighborhood as I do that they have houses next to them that operate as Airbnbs year round. In all respect to the gentleman who said it's pleasant, others have a very different experience of rotating loud parties in the houses next to them. And we've heard others share that experience. It's not always the pleasant experience. That changes the nature of our communities. You don't have a chance to build long-term relationships if there's a constant revolving door of folks coming in and out of the properties next door. I have other friends who live in the neighborhood who've tried to purchase property next to them with the goal of bringing family into the community. And they've lost out to folks who were buying them with the sole intent of renting them long-term as short-term rentals. So there's a serious problem here that needs to be addressed. And I thank all the board members for working together to find a solution that limits the appeal of real estate purchases for the sole purpose of short-term rentals. So please, keep working together. Let's make this happen. Whittling it away too far is not the answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Greg, I believe it's pronounced Lipper. Correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize.
Yeah. Hi, Greg Lipper. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. 99 Brush Hill Road. Great meeting. My first one attending. So I'm a resident here. I live, my primary resident, live here full time. Also have a second place here that I do rent out from time to time. Just a couple data points. I think you're going to have people like me for whom it won't be 90 days, 180, whatever it is. We use the other place sometimes. It's not going to. We're not going to sell, and we're not going to rent it long term. There's not going to be any difference other than you'll have fewer visitors and some lower tax revenue. But as the other caller said, the big impact you're going to have short term is some homes that are rented 300 days or whatever will only get rented 90 days, and the neighbors will notice it, and you'll have a little less tax dollars. But you'll definitely see some changes for those neighbors. In having less, and we curate the people who come in, but we have somebody 2 doors down doesn't curate, and there's a big difference whether you curate your guests or not. So we have a lot of repeat guests and mostly families, but yeah, the college students that party, it's not fun. And I would just say I'm a consultant, so just a couple of things I think about is you want to pick a formula that you can track so that you don't create this monster, right? I think you guys are going down the right track, right? So you think about, you can identify very quickly if someone's a primary resident or not. You can limit them to 2 homes. As soon as you start getting into these shades of how many days they're living there, or even, there's a lot of loopholes people will get through. So you want to pick something that's easy to track. And then I would just say forecast out. You're not going to get much movement in housing stock or housing prices. Short term, you'll get nothing. There's a tremendous demand from out of towners still. We know this because we've had renters offering to buy our place who live in New York City who would only use it on the weekend. There's crazy money out there from the city. And it's just until interest rates go way up or we have a deep recession, that's going to overshadow anything we do in the short term. But you want to think about how this will impact, what does Great Barrington, we're going to live here the rest of our lives, right? So what is Great Barrington going to look like in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now? And you might model what other towns have done with putting similar restrictions and what are the long-term impacts. Clearly, you don't want to have corporations, investors, REITs coming in, buying a bunch of places with investor money and such. So you guys seem like you're on the right track, and just wanted to share those comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, select board time. Garfield.
I said I had been speaking with, I had mentioned how I would like to make sure that everything was running smoothly with the police department and all that good stuff. And I had a little email with Kara, and I just wanted to know the new officers have been trained with their sensitivity training. All that. The station will be fully accredited this fall, so they're on board what we'd like to see, and they're doing the right thing. So I applaud them.
Terrific. Eric.
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Ed.
Nothing.
Lee.
Nothing.
And I have nothing. Media time. See no hands raised. So by unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.